They never expected you to go quiet. They prepared for your anger, your retaliation, your breakdown, but not your silence, not your peace, because peace doesn't just mean you've moved on. It means you've won a war they never thought you'd escape. They were ready for noise, ready for a fight, but peace, that's something they can't argue with. It leaves no cracks, no doors open, no stage to perform on, and that's what haunts them most, that you didn't need to scream. You didn't need to prove anything, you just stopped quietly, fully, and in that silence, in that stillness, you told them everything they needed to know. You are no longer theirs to break. Your healing became your exit. Your peace became the punishment, and now they're left behind, confused, powerless, watching you rise in a world where they no longer matter. The quiet eggs, it hurts more than loud revenge. They expected chaos when you left. They were waiting for the explosion, the yelling, the name, calling, the scenes. They had rehearsed their roles well, ready to defend, ready to deny, ready to paint themselves as the misunderstood ones. But you didn't give them the theatre they were craving. No curtain call, no last dramatic act. You just walked away quietly, no message, no explanation, no final round, and that silence, that was the loudest thing they'd ever heard. Because some people don't fear consequences, they fear being irrelevant, and when you left without noise, without permission, without begging them to understand you, you took something from them that they never expected to lose: control. There is a kind of strength that is not taught in schools or written in books. It's the kind that lives in people who have been pushed to the edge, but refuse to fall the way others hoped they would. People who learn that peace is not a performance, it's a decision. When someone wounds you, the world often tells you to retaliate, stand up for yourself. They say, show them who they're messing with. But there's another kind of standing up for yourself, a quiet one. One where you gather your dignity, pick up your heart and carry it away without looking back. And that kind of departure, it disorients the people who expected you to break into pieces, because now they're left with a version of you they cannot touch, cannot provoke, cannot read. They thought you needed them, that your identity was tied to the conflict, to the noise, to their validation. But when you chose peace over participation, when you refused to argue, to explain, to fight, they didn't feel victorious. They felt exposed, because your silence stripped them of the role they wanted to play. You didn't give them the satisfaction of watching you unravel. You didn't even give them a closing sentence, just absence, just the void of your energy, your kindness, your forgiveness. And suddenly they were left standing in a story that could no longer continue without your lines. Understand this: walking away quietly is not weakness, it is mastery. It is restraint wrapped in power, because anyone can throw words like stones, but it takes a different kind of discipline to hold the storm inside you and walk through the door anyway. Without fanfare, without bitterness, with your head high and your soul unshaken. That's when you stop being someone they can manipulate and start becoming someone they can never forget. Not because of what you did, but because of what you didn't do. Revenge is temporary. It fades, the satisfaction of winning. An argument dies quickly, but peace, that stays. It follows you like sunlight after a long winter. And when they finally realize that you're not coming back, not to beg, not to explain, not even to hurt them, it begins to sink in. You weren't the chaos, you were the calm. You were the safe place, the sanctuary. The heart that gave more chances than they deserved, and now that presence is gone. It's not anger that echoes in their mind, it's your calm, your absence, your quiet. That's the punishment, not because you intended it, but because they never imagined you could live without them. You see, the quiet exit is not a strategy, it's a realization. It's the moment you understand that not every battle deserves your energy, that some people feed on your reactions, and the most powerful move you can make is not to feed them anymore. Not your anger, not your confusion, not your hope, nothing. Just silence, just peace, and as your world starts to grow again, slowly, gently, beautifully, they're left behind, watching from a distance, unable to reach you. Not because you're hiding, but because you're healing, and healing has a way of locking old doors forever. So if you've ever left quietly, with no fireworks, no drama, know this: that silence was your sword. That exit was your shield. You didn't lose the fight. You ended the war. And in that stillness you chose, in that quiet retreat, you found something they never expected you to have: power without violence, strength without sound, and peace that speaks for itself. Indifference is a language they can't understand. They never expected you to stop reacting. That's what unsettled them the most. Your silence, your stillness, your calm detachment. It wasn't part of their script. Because they thrived on your energy, the arguments, the justifications, the hurt in your eyes. They needed that cycle, that emotional transaction, to keep their illusion alive. Every time you explained yourself, every time you got upset, every time you cared, they felt important, in control, significant. But when you stopped feeding the fire, when your indifference replaced your investment, it rattled them to their core. Because suddenly the game stopped working, and they couldn't figure out why. You see, indifference is not hatred, it's not anger. It's emptiness where passion used to live. And for people who fed on drama, who made themselves feel alive by triggering your emotions, that emptiness is suffocating. It's like shouting into a void and hearing nothing echo back. They try the same tricks, the same words, the same manipulations, but now you don't flinch, you don't argue, you don't even blink, and that confuses them, because you were once predictable, once responsive, once entangled in their chaos. Now you've become unreadable, silent, free, and freedom is the one thing they never wanted you to taste. They don't understand this new version of you, the one who no longer explains, no longer seeks approval, no longer participates in the emotional tug-of-war. You used to care, you used to overthink, you used to feel responsible for their moods, their pain, their guilt trips. But now you've disconnected. You've unplugged from the illusion that their behavior was somehow your burden. And when that switch flipped, when your empathy stopped being their playground, you became powerful in a way they never prepared for. Because your indifference is not coldness, it's clarity. It's the clarity that comes from being hurt too many times, lied to too often, taken for granted for too long. It's the quiet understanding that not every wound needs a bandage. Some just need distance. And so you stopped chasing closure, stopped demanding truth, stopped hoping they would change. You simply walked into your life and closed the door behind you, not with resentment, but with relief. Now they don't know what to do, because indifference can't be argued with. You can't guilt it, you can't manipulate it, you can't control it. It is immune to chaos, to flattery, to blame. It's not a wall, it's an open field they can no longer enter. And that kind of peace, it's unnerving to those who once found power in keeping you unsettled. It wasn't your anger that they feared. It was your ability to detach, to no longer play the part they wrote for you, to see them clearly without the fog of emotion. That's what they never saw coming, that you could outgrow the role they cast you in, that you could one day stop seeing them as essential, that your heart could move on, and not even leave a forwarding address. There's something deeply unsettling about being erased not out of spite, but out of necessity, when someone realizes you are never going to destroy them, only protect yourself. That's when it sinks in that they weren't as important as they believed, that the drama they created didn't leave a scar, it left you stronger, that they didn't break you, they sharpened you. And now, instead of standing in front of them with tears in your eyes, you're walking past them like a stranger, not out of hatred, out of evolution, because peace doesn't beg, it doesn't explain, it doesn't look back. It simply arrives, quiet, unshakable, whole. And when peace replaces panic, when serenity replaces suffering, the people who once controlled your emotions start to fade. Not because you erased them, but because they no longer exist in the version of your life where healing is the new language. And in that language, indifference is not cruelty, it's fluency. It's what you speak when you've run out of things to prove. So if you've reached that point where your voice is calm, your steps are steady, and your heart no longer reacts. Know that you're not cold. You're not bitter. You're just free, and freedom doesn't scream. It doesn't announce itself. It just exists, quietly, powerfully, unapologetically, and to the ones who once fed on your confusion, your silence is not just a mystery, it's a mirror. It shows them who they really are when you no longer reflect the version they tried to create. That's why your indifference is the loudest answer they'll ever get. That's why your peace is their punishment. Peace reveals what chaos tried to hide. There's something sacred about silence after the storm. Something almost holy about the way clarity begins to settle in once the noise fades. When you finally step away from the chaos, when the shouting stops, the accusations die down, and the endless emotional games come to a full and final halt, you begin to see what was always there, hiding in plain sight. Your peace doesn't just feel good, it reveals the truth, because chaos is a master illusionist. It distracts, it distorts, it keeps you chasing shadows, but peace holds up the mirror. And in that stillness, you finally see everything they tried to blur. The manipulation, the guilt traps, the emotional dependency disguised as love, the fear dressed as loyalty. It all comes into focus, not because they changed, but because you did. You stopped dancing to the tune they played. You stepped back, not to punish them, but to find yourself. And in that space, in that silence, something miraculous happened. The fog lifted. For the first time in a long time, you could breathe without asking permission. You could think without second guessing. You could feel your own emotions without being told which ones were acceptable. That's when it became clear. The chaos wasn't a phase. It was a pattern, and peace didn't destroy it. It exposed it. They worked hard to keep you off balance, to make you question yourself. They were kind just enough to confuse you, cruel just enough to weaken you. It was a cycle, carefully designed to keep you occupied, too distracted to see the bigger picture. Because as long as you were reacting, defending, explaining, you couldn't reflect. You couldn't ask the real questions. Is this love, or is this control? Is this care, or is this possession? But when peace entered, those questions answered themselves. Not with words, with evidence, with memory, with the clarity that only comes when the storm has passed and you're finally sitting in the wreckage, realizing who caused it, and who kept pretending it wasn't that bad. That's why peace is so dangerous to them. It dismantles the disguise. It reveals the truth that chaos worked so hard to cover up. Because when you're constantly fighting to keep the relationship stable, you don't have the energy to evaluate it. But once you stop fighting, you start seeing, and what you see is often unsettling. You realize how many times you were gaslit into thinking you were the problem, how many times your empathy was used against you, how often you apologized for simply having boundaries, and it hits you, not as anger, but as revelation. You weren't difficult, you were discerning, you weren't broken, you were being broken down, you weren't too much. You were in the wrong place. Peace gives you the gift of truth, and truth is what sets you free. Not the sugar-coated versions, not the half-truths you told yourself to survive, but the raw, sobering, liberating truth. And with that truth comes healing, slowly, painfully, beautifully. You begin to rebuild, not to prove anything, not to show them what they lost, but because your soul finally has space to breathe. Your nervous system begins to settle. Your mind begins to trust itself again, and your heart, it starts to believe in its own worth, not because someone else said so, but because you remember now who you were, who you are, who you were never meant to become. And as your peace deepens, something shifts on their side too. At first they don't notice. They think it's another silence, another break, another moment before you come running back to fix what you didn't break. But as time stretches on, and the silence becomes a pattern, not a pause, they begin to sense something's different. The spell is broken, the rhythm is gone, The familiar pull no longer works. You're not responding the way you used to. Not because you hate them, but because you're no longer bound by them. And that realization, it unsettles them in ways you'll never have to see. Because you're not there anymore, not physically, not emotionally, not spiritually. You've moved on, not with someone new, but with someone finally worth your time, yourself. So let them wonder, let them rewrite the story if they must. You're not obligated to defend your peace to the people who once tried to destroy it. Because peace isn't passive, it's powerful. It's the loudest declaration that you survived their chaos and found something better on the other side, truth. And once you find the truth, you can never go back to living in distortion. Let the world say what it wants. Let the past stay where it belongs. You're not who you were in the chaos. You're who you became in the calm. And that version of you, quiet, grounded, whole, is the one they can't touch, can't shake, can't predict. That's why your peace is their punishment. Not because you wished them harm, but because you finally stopped letting them harm you. And in doing so, you revealed everything they spent years trying to hide. They wanted a show, you gave them a ghost. They wanted drama. They were prepared for it, scripted it, rehearsed it in their mind day after day. They expected the pleading, the confrontation, the tears, the emotional outbursts. They were ready for the show. It gave them power. It gave them something to feed on. You see, for people like that, peace is boring. It's irrelevant. It offers no control, no chaos to manipulate, no buttons to push. They wanted to be the center of your breakdown. They wanted to witness the fall, the heartbreak, the desperate attempt to make sense of the madness they themselves created. But instead, you gave them nothing. No explosion, no accusations, no grand finale. You simply vanished, not into anger, not into revenge, but into stillness. And in that stillness, you became a ghost they never learned how to forget. They were expecting one more round, one more message, one more attempt to make them see you, hear you, feel something, anything, for what you went through. But you denied them the performance, and that silence, that haunting absence, speaks louder than any words ever could. Because when you disappear without drama, you take with you the oxygen that fueled their ego. They don't know how to respond to that kind of closure, the kind that doesn't involve them, the kind where you don't ask for validation, don't seek understanding, don't need a reaction. You just leave, calm, quiet, whole, and they are left there, stunned in the silence of a stage that no longer has an audience. That's what they didn't understand, that your strength was never in your ability to shout back, to fight, to match their fire. It was in your ability to walk away without leaving a trace. No footprints, no shadow, just absence. And absence, to someone who depends on your pain to feel powerful, is the cruelest form of justice. Because when someone can no longer access your emotions, they lose the power to shape your reality. And once you become emotionally unavailable to the ones who thrived on your vulnerability, you become untouchable. Not because you've hidden yourself, but because you've outgrown them. They mistook your silence for weakness. They thought your quiet eggs. It was a surrender. But what they didn't know is that silence is the most deafening response you can give to someone who expected you to scream. You didn't leave because you had nothing to say. You left because you realized there was nothing left worth saying. No words that would change their behavior. No argument that would bring accountability. No confrontation that would bring closure. So you gave yourself the closure. You gave yourself the ending. You turned off the lights, closed the curtain, and walked off the stage without applause. And now they're haunted by the show that never happened. They check your name, expecting to feel your presence. They scroll through memories, wondering where it all went silent. But you're not there, not in their mind, not in their inbox, not in their life. You are a ghost, but not the kind that begs for attention, the kind that lives in peace while they're still trapped in a loop, searching for meaning in your quietness. They wanted a confrontation, you gave them absence. They wanted a wound, you gave them distance. and in doing so, you did the one thing they feared most. You erased their power. Understand this: when you disappear without revenge, you leave behind a silence they cannot fill. They try to replace you, mimic the same dynamic, recreate the emotional battlefield with someone else. But it's never the same, because what they really miss is not just you. It's the control they had over you. The ability to trigger you, to bend your emotions, to make you doubt yourself. That's what they mourn in your absence. Not your love, not your loyalty, not your kindness, but the loss of control. And that loss feels like a void they can't explain to anyone, because they still have the illusion of power, but none of the substance. You took that with you, without noise, without fight, without permission. That's why your peace unsettles them, because in their world peace is foreign. They don't know how to function without tension. They don't know how to measure worth without emotional reactions. And when you stop reacting, you stop being a source of validation. You stop being a mirror for their chaos. You stop playing your role. And when the actor leaves the stage, the script falls apart. The whole play collapses, and they're left standing in the ruins of their own performance, still waiting for a response that will never come. They thought they would get the last word, but the truth is, your absence was the final sentence. It spoke louder than any confrontation. It wrote an ending they never got to control, and that is something their ego will wrestle with for far longer than any argument would have lasted. Because now they are left with the silence, the kind that doesn't just end a story, but buries it, and you're not broken. You're not watching from the sidelines. You're not hoping they notice your glow-up or read between your lines. You're gone, and gone doesn't mean unavailable. It means healed. You no longer walk in places that made you feel small. You no longer reach out to hands that only held you when it was convenient. You no longer exist in cycles. You've graduated from the game, and now your life is quieter, but richer, calmer, but stronger. You've chosen peace, not as an escape, but as a return to your true self. The self that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. The self that knows that love isn't supposed to hurt, that kindness isn't meant to be manipulated, that silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. So if you ever doubt your decision to disappear, to not give them the show, the scream, the scene, remember this: ghosts are not forgotten. They're remembered in whispers, in echoes, in the space that can't be filled. You didn't vanish because you were lost. You vanished because you were finally found, and nothing confuses the manipulator more than losing their favorite character to peace. Because your peace tells a story, one they didn't want to hear, one where they weren't the main character, one where the hero didn't fight back, but simply walked away, whole, quiet, untouchable, and in that, you became unforgettable. That is why your peace is their punishment. Healing is the exit they never saw coming. They were certain you would stay wounded, that you'd never get up, that the betrayal would break you beyond repair. Because that's how it worked before, wasn't it? They caused the damage, and you kept bleeding in their hands. Soft, forgiving, always hoping the pain would change them. But this time, something inside you shifted. Not with rage, not with revenge, but with revelation. You stopped waiting, stopped hoping they'd apologize, stopped needing them to understand. Because somewhere deep inside you realized the truth. Healing is not something you wait for them to grant you. It's something you claim without their permission. And when you began to heal, quietly and completely, without their involvement, that's when the punishment began, not because you intended to hurt them, but because they expected your healing to need their help. They expected you to stay shattered, and instead you walked away whole. Healing is not loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or declarations. It slips in like morning light, slowly flooding every dark corner they left behind. At first, they don't even notice it. They assume you're just pulling away again, like before, that you'll circle back, that you'll send a message, that you'll explain yourself, because in their world, healing is always temporary, a pause before the cycle restarts. But not this time. This time, You didn't pull away. You disappeared into something they never anticipated. Peace that doesn't depend on them. They look for the old version of you, the one they could confuse, the one they could control with silence, guilt, or sudden kindness. But that version doesn't exist anymore. That version is gone, replaced by someone quieter, stronger, more discerning. Someone who no longer just wants love, but requires respect. Someone who no longer begs for understanding, because they've already found it within. And that's what confuses them, that your healing didn't come from their remorse, but from your refusal to need it. Healing isn't just about feeling better. It's about seeing better. It's about realizing the patterns, the pain, the small compromises you made to keep things from falling apart. You start to look back and notice all the ways you tried to shrink yourself to be loved. How often you were loyal to someone who only valued you when you were useful, and it hurts, not just what they did, but what you allowed. But that hurt, it's sacred, because it becomes your teacher. It shows you what love is not, what respect is not, what you will never tolerate again, and from that place healing begins, not as a pretty process, but as a radical one. You start to reclaim your voice, your time, your space, your worth. They don't recognize this new version of you, and that's the point. You didn't heal to be recognized by the people who hurt you. You healed to remember who you were before they convinced you to forget. And now, every boundary you set, every moment of silence you protect, every time you choose peace over chaos, it sends a message, not of anger, but of transformation, a message they can't respond to, because they have no access to this version of you. You've locked the doors they used to walk through freely, and that's not revenge, that's recovery. They wanted you dependent. They wanted your healing to arrive slowly, so they could control the pace. They wanted to be needed, not out of love, but because your need validated their worth. But now you've made yourself the source. Now you don't chase closure. You create it. You don't explain your silence. You honor it. You don't demand accountability. You detach from those who refuse it. And that kind of healing, the kind that doesn't ask for permission, is what they never saw coming. They try to provoke a reaction. They'll send mixed signals, try to resurface through memories, mutual contacts, subtle manipulation. Not because they miss you, but because your detachment threatens their control. They don't want you healed. They want you haunted, but you've already chosen differently. You've chosen mornings without anxiety, days without explanation, nights without wondering if you're enough. You've chosen laughter again, purpose again, self-respect again, and the deeper your healing goes, the more they begin to realize. They didn't just lose your presence. They lost access to your energy, and that loss, that's where the punishment lies. Healing is a quiet rebellion. It's the refusal to let someone else's chaos shape your future. It's the ability to walk past what once broke you without flinching. It's smiling for no reason. It's no longer needing them to admit the truth because you know it. It's having nothing left to prove. It's seeing them from a distance and feeling nothing, no anger, no longing, just peace. And that peace is unsettling to them, because it means they don't live in your mind anymore. They don't occupy your spirit. They are no longer a chapter. They are a lesson, one you've learned and moved on from. Let them wonder, let them ask around, let them try to recreate the bond they destroyed. You're not there anymore, not in the way they remember. You're not available for manipulation. You're not responding out of guilt. You're not explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You've elevated quietly, authentically, and every time you breathe easier, laugh harder, love deeper. Without them, they feel it, not because you're trying to hurt them, but because your healing tells a story they can't rewrite. A story where they are not the hero, a story where you saved yourself, and that is why your peace is their punishment, because they were prepared to battle your anger, but they were never prepared to be forgotten by your joy.